Welcome to Inside the Numbers, folks. It's the People's Pundit, and it is Friday, July 28th. So get your Q&A in. We're going to try to get to as many as we can today, but we have a lot of ground to cover, and we have a late guest today. So Laura's like, get as many as you can in. Little show announcement here. All right, look, we are having a price change. We put it up on Locals yesterday, August. Go to Locals, go check it out so you can read the details of it. If you're already got an annual plan, you're good. If you're monthly and you want to move over to an annual, do it before August 1st. All right. And then, of course, people who are in the membership on YouTube, you have a code that you could use if you want to come over and be part of the Locals community. So now is the time to join the People's Pundit Locals community. We have so much we're excited for. All of the off-cycle gubernatorial elections we're covering. We already started with, obviously, Kentucky. We'll be covering the general. And Mississippi, Louisiana. But then, of course, we have next year as well that we're all gearing up to, and we're going to have a ton of stuff for you guys. All of the primaries, all of the nomination contests, the delegate tracker, and then all leading up to the main event, which is, of course, the presidential election. So it will be our biggest year. Join now while you can. Join the revolution. Thank you, Laura. peoplespundit.locals.com. Now, for the unpleasantries, all right? Just no more Mr. Nice Guy. It's time for a little bit of a reality check for Republicans. I'm going to show you a couple of things in the latest. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to tap an article, which is part one of a greater series that I wrote for People's Pundit years ago after Donald Trump won the 2016 election, trying to explain to people how significant it was that he won some of those, not just some of the states that he won, but the states that he won in the Rust Belt. Not just the traditional battlegrounds. Maybe Republicans can win these, maybe they can't. But the ones that had been way out of reach of the loser party and their loser candidates for decades. Literally decades. And the reason why I wrote so much about it in great detail, and part one is about teeing up the rest of the analysis, is because that year when I was doing the polling, which I was ultimately right about, anyone who knows me and has known me for a long time, my wife and team who were with me on election night and even throughout, the Larry Schweikerts of the world who would call us constantly, what's your latest saying here? What's your latest saying there? They will all tell you that I didn't particularly believe my own polling. I just trusted what the data was showing me, but I wasn't convinced. And I expected, at least in some of these states, to have some really big misses. At the end of the day, the misses we did have mostly were unfavorable to the eventual winner, who was Donald Trump. So, for instance, Iowa, we did not have him winning by that much. Ohio, we did not. And we did in the beginning, but our finals, I was much more conservative on. And I believe our final in Ohio was like Trump +3 or something, right? Now, granted, I learned my lesson. Fast forward to 2020, and our final poll in Ohio was dead on, as was 2022 with J.D. Vance, or 2020. Yeah, 2022. What am I talking about? With J.D. Vance's Senate race. And I had learned the lay of the land. I had learned a powerful lesson in 2016, which was believe the voters. And what I'm going to tell you here today is that you have to believe these voters when they tell you they're not going to vote for anybody else. You have to believe them when they tell you they will go back to either not voting or potentially voting for Joe Biden. You better believe them when they tell you this. I want to show you first tweet. You know the work we've been doing for months. If you've been watching a while, you've been listening a while. The only question this year was whether or not the voters who stay home, or if they do come out, vote for another party, but only vote for Donald Trump, whether or not that group of voters is bigger than the group that votes against Donald Trump. That was the only question this year. Because in my mind, after watching this party fail over and over, watching this man come in and change the map, and then during off-cycle, non-presidential cycles, watching these voters again stay home, again. Like, it's a very complicated coalition that we're talking about here. It was never a question of whether or not a tradition, in my mind, whether or not a traditional Republican could win a presidential election in this country. I'm here to tell you they can't. They don't have the support. They don't have the numbers. No matter who the Republican nominee is going to be, of course it's going to be incredibly difficult, no matter who it is. Doesn't matter if it's Donald Trump. In this, sadly, in this environment, it could be Jesus Christ. That's just where we are as a country right now. But I'm telling you, without any doubt in my head or heart, a Republican candidate not named Donald Trump cannot win a presidential election in this country. And it's time for a reality check specifically around the Rust Belt. If Republicans go back to a party without Donald Trump, or go back to a party that's perceived to have fought Donald Trump every step of the way, filled with a bunch of people who stabbed him in the back, filled with a bunch of people who betrayed him or cowered in the face of maybe potentially their own persecution, whatever the American people are going to derive from what they're seeing here. If they go back to that party, it's over. The state of Michigan is not even competitive. Pennsylvania is not competitive. They may get close here and there. Hell, Mitt Romney got almost within 4 points. Still got his ass kicked. He couldn't win Ohio. He couldn't win Iowa. John McCain almost lost the show me state. Did lose the Hoosier state. And it's time for Republicans to appreciate. And I love you, Kurt, but it was a little bit more than just threading a needle in 2016. So let's start with one, and then we're going to get into that article, like I said. Here's David from Suffolk University. A couple of days after our poll in Iowa came out, the general election matchup between Biden and Trump, and Biden and DeSantis were released, in which we clearly showed you Trump had a very, very comfortable lead in the state of Iowa. DeSantis did not. He was in the 30s, and he had a 2-point lead. That's it. Well, with enough undecideds and enough I won't vote. Plenty of them to actually cost him the state of Iowa. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. May have been a narrow miss circa George Bush. Could be a narrow win circa also George Bush. But Iowa will be a battleground state again. A couple days later, here's David. Suffolk, USA Today. Ohio. Damn near identical. Comfortable 6-point lead for Donald Trump. A 2-point lead for Ron DeSantis in the 30s. 92% of DeSantis' voters say they would vote for Trump. Almost exactly what we found in the state of Iowa. But 83% of Trump voters said they would vote for DeSantis against Biden. A slice says Trump or bust. David, thanks for the credit. Thanks for using my phrase and not crediting me. But whatever. As long as this conversation is being had. They trashed this. Team DeSantis trashed this poll. All of the naysayers, they trashed it like they trashed the Iowa poll, even though, folks, we were in the field at the same time. If David wanted to fake data to make it look like my numbers, he wouldn't even have had time to do that. And by the way, while we had the same amount basically saying of DeSantis voters, yes, I will vote for Donald Trump, he actually found slightly more of Trump voters. I think we were at 75%, if I remember correctly. And they found 83. But folks, that 17% is the difference between an election or not. Now here we are. Fast forward another week. I know it's small. Bear with me. Interactive. Dave from another Dave runs interactive polls. Ohio Northern University. Trump with a 10-point lead. 49-39. But DeSantis only with a 2-point lead. So Trump's headed in the right direction. DeSantis is flat. Biden against Scott. Biden +1. If you think they're wrong, think again. Think again. Maybe see, a lot of these never Trumpers have been around for a long time, but a lot of these new DeSantis people honestly don't know what the hell they're talking about, have never been involved in a campaign, have never called a presidential election a day in their life, wouldn't know what the hell to do if they came in my office today and I gave them free reign of the place. They think being a so-called influencer on Twitter makes them an expert or something. They have no idea what they're talking about. And the truth is, most of the instances, I was polling presidential elections while their mother was still wiping their asses. Ohio and Iowa are not take it for granted red states. They are not. And in fact, while they vote almost identical to each other with Donald Trump on the ballot, the fact is, Iowa has a very long history of voting to the left of Ohio against traditional Republicans. John McCain lost Ohio by 4 in 2008. He got crushed, 12 points in Iowa. Mitt Romney lost Ohio by about 3 points in 2012. He lost Iowa by double, 6. As a matter of fact, let's take a look at why I didn't believe, especially in the state of Ohio. Wisconsin and Ohio, I thought would be the biggest misses for me. Or not even, well, at the end of the day, our Ohio is only Trump +3. So I really didn't think that, that those would be, that would inevitably be a big miss. I just thought that, like, if I was going to miss something, it would be Wisconsin, where I had Trump slightly up, and certainly Michigan. The Rust Belt in general. Here's why. To the left of your screen, you will see Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama in 2012. To the right of the screen, you will see Donald Trump versus Joe Biden in 2020. When it comes to Iowa and Ohio, there's basically no difference in the 2016 and 2020 maps. Trump just didn't lose any support. We'll go over it in more detail, but Iowa actually is a state with the largest number of pivot counties. They voted for Obama not once, but twice, but then voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and he held them, every single one of them, in 2020. There are 31 of them. 31. Here's Ohio. Let's do a comparison. Again, to the left is Willard getting his ass kicked against Barack Obama. And to the right is then incumbent President Donald Trump against now President Joe Biden. However, again, I could pull up the Hillary map, but it's not much different. It goes to some of the questions I saw in the comments from YouTube to locals when I was getting ready to come on air here. Where specifically are these Trump-only voters? Where are they? And by the way, did you see the polling against Sherrod Brown? Sherrod Brown is an incumbent. He's no Tim Ryan. However, Tim Ryan, I will draw your attention to the northeastern part of the state, where Mahoning County is, right? You can see Mitt Romney lost it. But I will draw your attention to that part of the state. Tim Ryan was from there. That's what made people think he would be a strong candidate against anyone, J.D. Vance, whatever it may be. By the way, Willard lost Mahoning to Barack Obama 63.4 to 35.1. Mahoning County, that entire area, the Northeast, man, you kidding me? That's Trump country, dude. Trump flipped Mahoning County on net 40 points. Biden came a little bit closer, but he still lost it by 2. And then all around that area, you have just, Trump or bust voters. If they come out, they could vote for a Democrat. They would definitely vote for a Barack Obama. They would definitely vote for an RFK, by the way. They could even vote for Joe Biden against somebody like Ron DeSantis. And that's exactly what both of those polls that we just went over are showing. They're showing that Ron DeSantis is doing awful in the Northeast, the Southeast, and even in northwestern parts. Trumbull, Woods, all of these areas where Donald Trump just completely changed the map. It doesn't matter if it's Ron DeSantis or Tim Scott, they cannot match the performance in those areas. A southeastern part, look at how light red even some of the areas in southeastern Ohio, look at how light red they were, even in areas Mitt Romney won. Because despite the fact that Appalachia, Ohio was starting to pull away from the radical left-wing lunacy of the Democratic Party under Barack Obama in 2012, Obama lost support there. There's no doubt. But they still couldn't bring themselves to vote for a Republican. Why? Because they view them a certain way. And I got news for you. All of you better hear me and hear me loud and clear right now. There isn't that much of a difference between Ron DeSantis and Mitt Romney in the minds of those kinds of voters. They do not view Ron DeSantis as some kind of MAGA person, MAGA guy, super good with the people, cares about people like me. And honestly, why would they? Did he or did he not oppose Donald Trump's trade strategy with tariffs? He did. He opposed it. Did he or did he not back TPP? He did. Trump came in and eviscerated it. Is the Club for Growth not supporting Ron DeSantis? They are. Matter of fact, the president and CEO of Club for Growth was just at that event in Utah the other weekend. Mr. McIntosh. Maybe in your partisan mind as a Republican, you think Ron DeSantis is much better than Mitt Romney, but to the middle of the road, Midwest, salt of the earth, working class, he's not any different at all. He's not. Especially not by the time Democrats get done with him. Oh, no. Not by the time they run all sorts of stories about how he thinks slavery was good for black people because they developed skills that they, without the white man, they wouldn't have gotten on their own. Wait until they paint him as anti-gay. Wait till they paint him as Rick Santorum on abortion. Wait. Anyway, as you can see, that's the answer largely. You can see Trump wins all the way up to Toledo in the Northwest. There isn't some blue wall from the northern part of the state, north central, from the western area, from Trumbull Woods and from Toledo all the way to the right, to the east, to Mahoning and Woods. You just don't, it's not there. There is no blue. There's Toledo, and then there's their old northeastern, what was once an incredible source of votes, but no longer is. So what? Trump loses central Franklin County worse than Mitt Romney. Who cares? In a Midwestern coalition, you trade those people in a heartbeat. See you later, Franklin. You can have your George W. Bush, Tupperware soccer moms. I'm taking Eastern Ohio. You can have your half a point. I'll take my 11. Thank you. Have a nice day. So even if, again, going back to the ultimate question, which group was bigger? Even if the DeSantis campaign's argument about electability, which is clearly blowing up in their face, given every single poll. Do not show me the Marquette poll. It is the one and only outlier. It has been the most pro-DeSantis outlier the entire cycle. Frankly, I think they're smoking crack over there. They're out of their minds. Every other pollster has Trump at 55, 60, and they still have it like a 2-point race or something. They have been the most pro-DeSantis and a wild outlier, not just an outlier, a wild outlier the entire cycle. So I don't want to hear about it. Even if we're going to win back the Franklin suburban woman argument, even if it was true, it could still cost you the state of Ohio. It will almost definitely cost you Iowa. It's definitely going to cost you Pennsylvania because you're not going to do well enough in Doco or Montgomery or Chester or even Burke for that matter to offset getting creamed in Lackawanna, the rest of the Northeast, all the way in the Northwest Erie County without absolutely beating a Democrat like a drum in areas like Greene all the way to Westmoreland. It's not there. The votes don't exist. And let's talk about, again, I'm not going to go through the entire, we're not going to read all 3 articles of this. I'm going to read the first one verbatim, just to give you an idea of how significant it was when this happened. Okay? God, time flies by, doesn't it? Look at that date. Inside Donald Trump's Rust Belt Revolution. A revolution in the Rust Belt. Part 1 of what is a multi-part series on the impact and significance of the 2016 presidential election cycle. We briefly looked at the Democratic Party's losses under Barack Obama. In subsequent articles, we will continue to examine the potential future impact these losses could have on a party, as well as the forces at play responsible for them. In the second edition, we'll look at the changing electoral map and why it favors the Republican Party under President-elect Donald J. Trump. However, they had to not resist the guy and his message, but they did at every step of the way, and they still are to this very day. I've repeatedly argued in more columns that I can count that political coalitions, like economic policy changes and impacts, do not occur in a vacuum and are ever changing. Yes, it's true that Democrats are poised to benefit from the demographic shifts in the country, but that was only if they could hold on to at least a substantial percentage of their traditional working class white base in certain regions. They did not. And as I predicted they would 2 years ago in, quote, putting the Hispanic vote myth to bed once and for all, they lost. And by the way, I did that. That was written after Mitt Romney lost. And the entire argument that I was making and other people like Sean Trendy were making before he lost his freaking mind is that Mitt Romney could have won 70% of the Hispanic vote and he still would have lost the election. That's math. Basic arithmetic. Mitt Romney lost because Barack Obama did better with white working class voters than polls or anyone suggested. And he drove up his African-American base, particularly African-American women. Those were the 2 coalitions responsible for Mitt Romney's failure under the same people, by the way, polling for Ron DeSantis right now, blowing smoke up his ass, and Barack Obama's second term. Which, by the way, David Axelrod and Pluff and the rest of them absolutely knew was going to happen. This political shift has been underway for several cycles, as is evident by their slide among voters in the Appalachia region. But it's obviously exacerbated by the candidacy of a, quote, working class billionaire, unquote, who added a substantial Rust Belt appeal to the mix. We'll take a look at these 2 regions and draw the following conclusion. If he delivers in his first term, a President Trump could do severe long-term damage to the electoral viability of the Democratic Party. While none of this is set in stone and greatly depends on Mr. Trump himself, at the end of the day, it actually depended more on the Republican Party than I gave credit for. The following analysis could prove particularly true if the party continues to move far to the left of mainstream American voters. Judging by their top pick for chairman of the Democratic National Committee, it would appear that part of the equation is already coming to fruition. Representative Keith Ellison, Democrat, Minnesota, a controversial Muslim lawmaker whose extremist ties to the Nation of Islam, the Muslim American Society, and the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE, has been backed by Senator Bernie Sanders, the outgoing Minority Leader Harry Reid, and the incoming Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. The big picture. The large and increasingly suspicious majorities in high population states such as California, Illinois, and New York are responsible for Mrs. Clinton's popular vote lead, but they mask a devastating electoral college vote defeat, both beneath the surface and across the board. This is particularly true in the Rust Belt and the Midwest as a whole. The Rust Belt, by the way, the reason why I'm talking about them as two regions is because they largely are colloquially, speaking, I should say, include places like Pennsylvania, and that's really the mid-Atlantic. All right, so when you think of the Rust Belt, it's the greater Midwest, which includes Indiana, even Missouri, and other places. You know this from the Public Polling Project, how we define our regional definitions, but Pennsylvania is not really the Midwest. Parts of it can be considered it. It is the mid-Atlantic. All right, so that's something that confused a lot of people. I just wanted to define that. During the primary, then candidate Donald Trump claimed he would compete in these states, and Republicans have not and could not. While only 6 states flipped from supporting the Democratic presidential candidate to the Republican, 3 of them were not traditional battlegrounds. Further, of the remaining 3 traditional battlegrounds that did flip, Florida, Ohio, and Iowa, the latter was close and contested in only one of the prior 6 presidential elections. Again, before Trump won Iowa, and he won it comfortably, it was only contested in one of the last 6 presidential elections because George W. Bush, and we're going to get into it, narrowly won it. It had been talked about all the time. But the truth is, loser Republicans got their asses kicked in Iowa all the time. In 2004, heavy evangelical turnout due to a bunch of nationwide initiatives, value votes with referendums from gay rights and all sorts of stuff. Turned out value voters for Bush. It was a brilliant strategy. You have to give them credit for it. But he won a narrow 10,000 vote victory over John Kerry. Folks, that's 49.9% to 49.2%. Then in 2008, then Senator Obama hammered McCain 54 to 44. And in 2012, he easily carried the state against Mitt Romney 52 to 46. But in 2016, Trump demolished Mrs. Clinton in the Hawkeye state 51.2 to 41.7. Again, slightly under Obama's support level overall for the state, but drove Hillary Clinton's down below John McCain. With the exception of Lynn, Johnson, and Scott, Mr. Trump flipped nearly all of the eastern counties in the state, counting Scott County, which went for Mr. Obama by 14 points and only went for Mrs. Clinton by 1.5. A whopping 18 eastern counties alone flipped from Mr. Obama to Trump. In the southern part of the state, Union and Clark, which backed Mr. Obama by roughly 4-1, went to Trump by a 2-1 margin. Again, he held these margins against Joe Biden in basically every county. And he increased his margin in some. We went over this after 2020. We went over the 31 pivot counties. I still have the sheet. And if we have time, I'll show it and we'll go over it. Highlighting where he did better, where he did worse. It's a monumental shift. And nearly every pollster, except for us and Trafalgar, if I believe, didn't seem to understand it would be that significant as it relates to other Rust Belt states, including Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and then even Minnesota. What I'm trying to say is here, and this is what, again, a big point that people are forgetting. The moment that Emerson poll months ago came out and showed that Trump would easily carry Iowa and that DeSantis was basically struggling to get above 40%, the moment that happened, everybody who should have went, whoa, something about Rust Belt Ron isn't making sense here. The final Des Moines Register poll in 2016 that showed Trump up by 7 over Hillary Clinton is widely believed in my industry to have forecasted Mrs. Clinton's weakness in the Rust Belt and Donald Trump's strength in the Rust Belt. Iowa has the largest number of pivot counties. And while, yes, it's whiter and more rural, it foreshadows a strength or weakness in that region of the country. So when you see Rust Belt Ron and Rick and Tim Scott within the sampling era are getting ready or even losing to Joe Biden in these states, it immediately should tell you they are not competitive in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, let alone Minnesota. So it's gone. There is no way, no chance that they are going to have a snowball's chance in hell of carrying any of these states. Reality check. Stop sniffing the glue. Most pundits, now largely discredited, blame low turnout in the Great Lakes state for it going red for the first time since 1988. The first time since 1988. And yet, a party of losers. Again, I just gotta say, the first time since 1988. 31 pivot counties in the Hawkeye state. 1988 in the Great Lakes state. It's 1984 in the Badger state. And yet these losers seem to think this historical significance means nothing. They could do it, though. They could do it. Why? What evidence do they have of this? Because one of them, who's got a revolving door on Wall Street and K Street, can raise money and has a really good story. He's a black senator from the South. No, only your dumb white ass cares about that. That doesn't impress anybody. It doesn't tell them whether or not he cares about them and their problems. And the other one, I won a gubernatorial election in an off-cycle contest, and then I'm incumbent. Who cares? Mitt Romney won the state of Massachusetts. It didn't mean he was going to be competitive against Barack Obama. Gubernatorial elections mean nothing. In Michigan, Trump carried 12 counties that voted to re-elect Mr. Obama in 2012, including Monroe, Bay, Eaton, Saginaw, and Macomb. Okay, stop. In Macomb County, voter turnout actually increased 4% compared to only 1.1% increase statewide from 4 years ago. So much for the low turnout argument. Monroe County and Macomb County are how Donald Trump carried and is even competitive in the state of Michigan, and other Republicans are not. Oakland County used to be Republican. It is no longer Republican. Even northwestern Oakland County is getting to be very difficult for Republicans. Alyssa Slotkin went against some pretty bad, awful candidates and, had been lucky, but for the most part, she lives in Holly. She made herself a Holly hometown girl. That certainly helped. And you have a lot of educated white people with money moving into that area, north of Warren, even in Macomb. And it's making it difficult for traditional Republicans. Not difficult. It's impossible for traditional Republicans to win. It's not there. The numbers aren't there. Trump wins by running his support in Monroe to nearly 60% and winning Macomb in the 50s. And that is enough to offset more than enough to offset the damage that is done in Oakland County. And then you have to use a dominant performance in the western part of the state all the way to the Upper Peninsula to overcome the massive net vote gain that Democrats are going to get from Wayne County alone. Macomb County, we've done voter analysis on a lot on locals, and I did it for a reason. While there is no party registration in Michigan and the voter model has to infer using machine learning technology, it has thousands of attributes to infer whether you are in fact a Republican or not. Monroe and Macomb, not so much Monroe anymore. I think Monroe did tilt slightly Republican, but Macomb, where Trump wins 55, 57% of the vote, is majority Democrat inference. Even, and you could say Tudor Dixon ran a terrible campaign, whatever, and she didn't have the money and whatever. Look at her number, her total number of votes next to the last Republican governor of the state of Michigan, Schneider. Compare them. Do it. She still put up more votes than he did. And yet she lost Macomb County. Compare what she did in Monroe to Trump. Awful. Awful. The bottom line is Republicans in whatever, for Senate, for governor, the only way they're going to win, any traditional Republican or non-Trumplican is going to win the state of Michigan, is if there is a massive collapse in Democratic turnout. Guess what, folks? That's not going to happen again. Ever again. Not until it goes back to being an election day voting state. The days of crossing your fingers and toes and hoping young people didn't show up for Democrats or hoping black people stayed home. Let's get real. That's the Karl Rove strategy. That's the Mitt Romney strategy. That's the John McCain strategy. That's the Bush strategy. Disenfranchisement. I hope these people don't vote. Those days are over. They're coming out. You have to actually beat them. So picking some very awkward, weird, three-finger chocolate pudding eating slob to go to Michigan and win these voters over is stupidity. Clinton only won 8 counties, including Genesee, Ingham, Kalamazoo, Marquette, Muskegon, Oakland, Washtenaw, and Wayne. However, in the Democratic stronghold of Wayne, the state's largest population-wise, was able to hold down the Democratic margin as he ran up record spreads in rural counties. That's how he won. With a 289,000 vote lead in Wayne, Mrs. Clinton did get 78,884 fewer votes than Mr. Obama and roughly 53,000 fewer votes than John Kerry in 2004. And Trump got 14,449 more votes than Governor Romney did. At first glance, it would appear the next Democratic candidate could overcome Mr. Trump's margins in the rest of the state if they perform at historical levels in Wayne County alone. Mr. Trump only carried the state by 13,000 votes, but that conclusion foolishly assumes the working class and suburban votes the winner left on the table do not vote in 2020. And as I'll state one more time, political coalitions do not evolve in a vacuum. We'll have to watch new registrations and party preference changes closely over the next 4 years. Again, you have to watch registrations, but talking about where they're coming from. What ages are they? What race? Do we have an inferred ethnicity? And the truth is, even though we lost it, I was right. 100%. Because Joe Biden increasing his vote in Wayne County was not enough. It was not enough. He was able to do better in areas like Kent and Saginaw. And that's ultimately what did, I think that's totally full of shit. I think that's total BS. I do. But that's what's recorded. That's what's there. That's what was counted. Put it like that. Pennsylvania. Like Michigan, the Keystone State had not gone for a Republican on the presidential level since 1988. Unlike Michigan, no one can blame low voter turnout in Democratic strongholds. Mr. Trump beat Mrs. Clinton, pure and simple. In Philadelphia, she came out with a 457,000 vote lead, which was down slightly from Obama's 479 and 492 in 08 and 12, respectively. But that wasn't due to turnout. It was due to voter preference. Trump did better in that area. She actually outperformed Mr. Kerry in 04, a year in which he nearly lost the state to Bush and held on by a few thousand votes. Mr. Obama won 85.2 of the vote in 12, but Clinton 82.4 in 16. In Allegheny County, which includes Pittsburgh and its suburbs, she actually received a little less than 16,000 votes than Mr. Obama, but Trump basically flipped the rest of the state. And by the way, Trump was in the 40s. Mitt Romney, 33%. Mr. Obama only lost by about 270,000 votes. I'm talking about the rest of the state. Romney only won the rest of the state by 270,000 votes. Trump, he won the rest of the state by 630,000. You have any idea how significant that is? And some schmuck like Tim Scott or Ron DeSantis are just going to do that? Are you out of your minds? Have you ever been to the state of Pennsylvania? The people in like these obscure places like Mifflintown and Juniata County are just going to come out for Tim Scott and Ron DeSantis? You're nuts. Tired of being nice. These are just a-holes anyway, frankly, who don't know how to take criticism and cry like little babies. Sick of being nice to these people. Some of them are the most awful people on the planet. You think they're going to win over those swing voters in Erie County? What the hell does somebody in northeastern Pennsylvania near Bidentown or Scranton or Lackawanna or any place like, what the hell incentive do they have to go out and vote for one of these people? As was the case all over the Rust Belt, flip counties that previously voted for Mr. Obama in 08 and 12, including Erie. County voted for Obama by 16 points, and Trump won it by about 2 points. Considering the demographics, very likely that trend could continue, and I do believe, obviously, barring vote by mail, it would have continued. And we'll talk more about Appalachia in a future edition, which I do in great detail. But counties classified as belonging to the Appalachia region represent 52 of the 67 counties statewide in the Keystone State. And they cast about 44% of the vote. They went big for this guy, folks. Big. Just under 500,000 votes. Up from 176 for Willard. That's it. Wisconsin, the Badger State, went for a Republican for the first time since '84. This state voted for Michael Dukakis over George Herbert Walker Bush in 1988. Bush won over 400 electoral votes, and the Badger State, he still didn't win it. Think about that for a second. And these platitudes and crazy ephemeral arguments that just make no sense and have no empirical data or historical data to support their validity are not going to change that. This time, it went to Trump. 1 point margin exactly. 27,257 votes. And that may not seem very significant until you consider it resisted the national trend, like I just said, in 88. 426 electoral votes. Wisconsin has more in common with Pennsylvania than it does Michigan. Meaning he changed minds and he flipped voters who backed Mr. Obama in significant numbers. In Dane, home to Madison, and Milwaukee County, she lost only a combined net 1,000 votes versus Obama in 2012. That's it. The rest of the state did her in. Outside the two vote-rich Democratic strongholds, Trump beat Clinton by nearly 340,000 votes. You know how many Romney beat? Barack Obama by in the rest of the state, ladies and gentlemen? 100,000. That's it. There it is. Willard to the right, Trump to the left. And the 2020 map ain't all that different, folks. Ain't all that different. You see Jour, the little finger on the eastern side of Wisconsin? That's about it. And I think we're talking about 20 or 30 votes. Something ridiculous. But that's about it. Sauk red. Northwest, lumberjack country. Ashton, Bayfield, Douglas, light blue. Willard, dark blue. Dan Kelly, dark blue. Everybody not named Trump or Ron Johnson, dark blue. That's the difference between winning the rest of the state by over 300,000 votes or winning it by just under 100,000 and you lose the state by 6 to 11 points. Donald Trump drove. Let's talk about the Ben Shapiro kind of voter in Wisconsin. There are no Ben Shapiro voters. There are voters that Ben Shapiro thinks he's talking to. They are white evangelicals. Midwestern white evangelicals, not coastal educated Jews. Like, they're totally different people. I don't know why I keep hearing about this demographic like it exists or something. It doesn't. And not only did Donald Trump drive up the share of evangelical vote higher than either George W. Bush or Willard, he won them by a much, much bigger margin. White evangelicals run all the way up to a quarter or over of the statewide vote when Trump is on the ballot, and he wins them by more than 70%, with more than 70%. And then he combines it with this this is the birthplace of the labor movement, the birthplace of the progressive labor movement, I should say. That's why Bayfield and Douglas and Ashton just hold on the way they do. Because he gets those like Democrat lumberjackers, even farmers still that are there. Congressman Tiffany was on War Room the other day explaining to Steve the kind of vote that lives in his district and north of that, which of course he's in the 7th district. That is Tiffany's backyard. Interesting about that district is he took over for somebody else and his name is slipping my mind right now. But the truth is he left. He's got kids and his wife and his wife's on Fox a lot. Not Mercedes. That's a slap, whatever. I'm forgetting at the current moment, but he rode in on the Tea Party wave with like 32% turnout statewide. And he was able to hold on because that district was starting to move in a more populist direction. However, it still voted for Barack Obama. Not once, twice. Twice. It's a district that voted for the Republican incumbent for Congress, yet voted against Willard and hometown boy Paul I stick steroids in my ass Ryan. How could that be? Because it's Paul Ryan and Willard Romney. A vampire capitalist, or whatever they were calling him. His little butt buddy protege who wants to throw grandma off a cliff and take away her Social Security. Did you hear Ron DeSantis' comment yesterday in Iowa, folks? They're going to have a field day with that in a place like Wisconsin. You know, we're going to have to leave it alone for you people now, but, if you're like still working, sorry, you're just not going to get it. And all these people over there who are farming or chopping down trees, whatever it is they do, like, what the hell am I doing? So why am I paying into the system if I'm not going to get it? Jack Posobiec and I, for years, have been talking about how, speaking of the Shapiros of the world, They completely overlook the importance of that part of MAGA. It's not about theory to these people. It's not about political theory or budget solvency. You made me a promise, and you're breaking that promise, but you're not breaking your promises to your scumbag defense contractors in the military industrial complex. Oh no, they still get their money. Ron DeSantis is going to tell people that they have to pay into Social Security and not get their Social Security check back, but he'll have no problem starting coups in Ukraine and sending Zelensky hundreds of billions of dollars. To them, it doesn't matter what you have to say about, let me take my pocket constitution out of my little front tee here. Let me open it up. Talk about the budget with you. Don't give a shit about that. You made them a promise. You lied. You reneged. You're a dirtbag. You're scumbags at Bain Capital, and the rest of you are still going to get your money. Ron DeSantis is still going to give his money to Bigelow. Ken Griffin's still going to get rich. Mr. Freed's still going to walk. But Joe Blow in Bayfield is going to lose his Social Security he's been paying into for 40 years. Dirtbag Republican. Can't imagine why they would say that. Bottom line, took a look at another state that was extremely close, the North Star State, or land of 10,000 lakes. Voted heavily for Trump on Election Day. Mrs. Clinton's small 1.5 lead was only saved by early voting. It began on September 23rd, before the vice presidential debate, before the second presidential debate, and the final debate. The August PPD, North Star State, battleground poll found a very close 3-point lead, which was a show of strength that eroded until the third and final debate. Had he played in the state, which we did identify at that point as a battleground, there could have been a chance he would have gotten those 10 electoral votes as well. However, and what we go on to say he needed to do in that state, he didn't do in 2020. And what we identified as the reason Mrs. Clinton still held on, they played to those strengths greatly in 2020. We had Biden up by 10 in Minnesota. He won by about 7. We overstated him slightly. But for the most part, I mean, by region, everything was dead on. And we can get into that another day. But that's not even a traditional area where you would expect that. Also, look at Appalachia, a region of the country that helped Mr. Trump carry the Keystone State and the Buckeye State, and one that also backed him overall by a 2-1 margin. For the record, we didn't leave out the bellwether, Ohio, which the New York businessman carried by an astonishing 9 points. We're just saving it for a discussion on the collapse of the Democratic Party in Appalachia. Let's talk about it now, shall we? Beacon Research. Polling some of the western southern states should be another red flag to anyone not named Donald Trump, and should be a red flag to Republican primary voters. While both Trump and DeSantis would carry a state like Tennessee, they're both going to carry a state like Kentucky. Why is Trump performing so much stronger? It's because of that region, those kinds of voters. It's time for Republicans to get in their stupid thick heads. And I'm sorry, I'm just so tired of playing this game. And then people steal my slogans, steal my research. I swear to God, it looks like some of these people are just copying and pasting crosstabs. It really looks that way. It's time for them to wake up, man. Will Scharf's going to come on in a little bit. We're going to talk about this a little bit more with him. In all seriousness, Republicans could not only end the lawfare, but do a good deal toward convincing those voters that they're for real too, and that they can trust them like they trust Donald Trump. When you're a spineless little coward who goes to the microphone and goes, it's wrong for this Soros-backed attorney to indict the former president, but I don't really know anything about hush payments to porn stars. You're a dirtbag to a normal dude. That guy made you. You're a nobody without him, and you threw your boy under the bus like that? It's like when they asked 50 Cent, they're like, oh, well, what do you think about Trump, man? What do you think about him? How come all these people like Paul Manafort, they went to jail and, why didn't they roll on Trump? When are they going to get Trump? And he's like, dude, he's the GOAT. And you don't rat on your boys. You don't turn on your boys like that. And you got dumbass Jake Tapper at CNN or whoever the hell it was. I can't even remember. Some schmuck like, what do you mean by that? Means the rest of the country, the little people down here, they don't roll over on their friends to save their lattes. Okay? Soy boys, they don't do that. So while they throw all these indictments at this guy, they're watching Republicans just be dirtbag Republicans like they always are, like they've been for years. Before we go to break, I just want to remind everybody that this was a dead party before Donald Trump came along. Killed by the Bush family, the Bush dynasty, and the scumbags that surround them. Killed by a loser the likes of John McCain. What kind of a scumbag, slimeball, shithead loser spends the waning days of his life mustering up the energy to go back to D.C. so he could put his dirty old man thumb down and kill a bill to make Trump look bad and to stab all of the voters in the back that he told for years, 7 years, I not only oppose Obamacare, I'm leading the fight to repeal it and replace it. What kind of a demented dirtbag, folks? Just imagine this for a second. You're on your deathbed, and yet you prioritize sticking your crusty ass thumb in your opponent's eye because you're jealous. Because you're a jealous loser who didn't get the White House and he did. I'm taking my old crusty ball and I'm going home. But you didn't. You chose to spend the rest of your days and hours on earth betraying your voters, betraying your state. Also, you could try to get one more dig in a man that you're jealous of. Not me. I'm going home to my family. I'm going to spend as much time with my family and my children and my legacy as possible. And the least amount of time, no offense, ladies and gentlemen, on this world, on this part of this world, which, frankly, I'm going to leave behind and there's not much I could do about. I'm going to spend the rest of my days caring about stuff that matters to my soul and my legacy. And those who I did all of this for, and they supported me. Not those losers. Their legacy is driving a once great political party, driving it into a brick wall at 120 miles per hour. Also, they can have Juanita fold their laundry. Their Kurdish friends kill themselves for them. That must have been a hell of a time at the pearly gates. Can we just get real for a second? What did you do with your life? Well, I killed and maimed 1 million Iraqis on a lie. Peter, can I go in? Can I go in now? I don't think so. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll make fun of these dipshits a little bit more. Just have to impress upon you, because I think that it's getting ready. It's like what in their little tiny minds makes them think that they're ever going to be able to achieve such a historic feat. There's no evidence to support they can. And I'm not talking about their fake piece of polls. All right. That's not real evidence. Everybody else was like, I wonder if this guy who's got this stream is on to something. I'm going to look into this Trump or bust idea. Once we got everybody to do it, it came out real clear, didn't it? Obviously. Let's take a break, shall we? Listen, folks. The country was run by crusty thumbs for way too long. You want to trust them with the power grid? Plus, we have authorities' legitimate fears that they are targeting the power grid. And that's according to Time magazine, not Breitbart, not the People's Pundit. If just 9 key substations were to go down, it would knock out power across the country for up to 18 months. Our lives, most of them, if we're honest with ourselves, would be frozen in time the moment that power went out. We just are not prepared to sustain such a crisis. That's why you need a solar generator. And the new Patriot Power Generator 2000X is portable, but it's powerful enough for your phones, devices, even medical devices, even your refrigerator. Right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and get one for 10% off if you use the promo code TPP10 at checkout. This code is for your first purchase only, so make it count. And you can by going there right now, 4patriots.com. They have tremendous deals, including the panels and everything. Just use that code TPP10 to get yourself 10% off. Plus, send Laura and I your feedback. We know you're going to love this thing. Many of you that we already got the feedback, we already know you do. Thank you for sending that to us. We have a natural gas generator, still saw the need for a solar generator. It is critical in this day and age. Critical. All right. You know what? We'll save the next one for the next break. People ask me, talking about these, we're going to have Will coming on here real soon, but the people always say, I get a text every day, and we hear from voters every day. Like, what are these people doing? Don't they care about destroying the country? Don't they care about causing what could be an political upheaval that there's no peaceful solution to? And the truth of the matter is, folks, they don't care. They don't care about destroying it all as long as they can be like the kings of the rubble. They don't care what the world looks like after they're done wrecking it, attempting to hold on to power, as long as they're the ones who still have whatever semblance of power remains over, what's left. What's that old saying, Laura? Better to rule over hell. What's that old saying, Laura? Somebody help me out here. You know what I'm talking about. It's just the truth. It's human nature, hotcakes. It's human nature. They'd rather do that than let it go. It's true. Better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. Thank you, hotcake. Amen, hotcake. That is what, it is exactly what we're dealing with here. And it's like when I saw Trump's Truth Social post. Let's see if I can get that up, actually, so everybody knows what I'm talking about. Do I even have Truth Social up right now? I may not. All right, let me look for it. Because this is just the reality. I have to just tell everybody. Everybody was expecting these indictments. We hear it from voters all the time. And I think when, and I love how people take what I say for posterity, just to remind people. I think it's Kyle Condon at Tiny Crystal Balls. They wrote an article saying, listen, what he's saying is the nomination's over. The beer and wine track in a Republican Party can be explained as follows. The beer track is the working class. All those voters we were just talking about being so key to anybody who wants to win the Rust Belt. Not only do you need them in a primary if you're a Republican, but you'll need a good deal of the wine track too. Somebody who had to beat, and that's more of an educated vote, somebody who ever planned to beat Donald Trump. And all Condon did was regurgitate what you hear on Inside the Numbers every day, or almost every day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. that anyone who was ever going to try to beat Donald Trump, even when we had DeSantis trailing by only 12 points, 43 to 31, and that was going back to, I believe, January, February. He had a lead with college voters, but it wasn't as big of a lead that Trump had with non-college voters. Wine, college, beer, non-college. All right. Anyway, at this point now, it's over because Trump's lead with the beer track is huge, bigger than it ever was, and honestly, bigger than anybody expected it would be. I polled some of these states. I would never believe, even in a state like Ohio, where he currently leads. Where is that graphic? I mean, look at this lead. Go down and you'll see GOP Prez. I mean, Trump's ahead by 52 points in the state of Ohio. By the way, DeSantis fell to third place. Vivek Ramaswamy now is in second place behind Ron DeSantis. I think what's going on here, thinking about the question we were just talking about, them wanting to they don't care how much to destroy everything as long as they get to rule over the rubble. On the Republican side of the electorate, the educated Republican voter has come to the conclusion that so many others had already come to. By the way, super credentialed, right? Super smart. They took a little bit longer than everybody else to come to the conclusion that, yes, they'll really do this. Yes, they'll wreck everything. They really will. They really will put a bunch of old people in jail in Michigan because they offered to be alternative electors to Donald Trump in 2020. Something, by the way, Barbara Boxer, Adam Schiff, and many other Democrats have tried to organize in the past. Hell, Barbara Boxer did it in 2004 when George Bush beat John Kerry. She wanted new electors. She cited statistical analysis of flawed exit polls to try to prove that, there's no way mathematically that John Kerry lost the state of Ohio. Hilarious. Anyway, when you look at numbers like this, nobody would have believed that Trump would have had the working class support that he has. And then now it's a matter of, and that's what Sabato's article is saying, it's not only that anymore. Now it's come down to these people on the educated wine track side of it are now, not only is Trump doing as well as he needs to do with them, more than well enough, he's actually winning them. And I do think that there is a connection between those two things, folks. All right. I really do. If you want, I'll give you that Ohio poll. Hold on. Let me throw it in with locals. Locals, there it is for you. Rumble. Let's get ready to rumble. There it is. Getter. I'm in a rumble mood today. I'm tired of these losers. I'm sick and tired of listening to stupid people pretend they're smart. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of paid people on Twitter pretending like they are like veteran campaign strategists or something. I'm sick of it. And frankly, I'm getting sick of people who are tired and old, like tiny crystal balls, taking things that we say and pretending it's their own original thought. Hotline Josh, who blocked me on Twitter, but yet still as a staffer, look at everything I have to say, does it all the time. I'm sick of it. And everybody's been taking pictures of it. Just so all of you understand, Jack Posobiec is all over you guys. He's got a running tally of the People's Pundit being robbed constantly. And how the People's Pundit says something first, and then these like mainstream tired losers who have no original thoughts anymore pretend 2-3 days later that they came up with this in their own mind or something. Anyway, Will Turd. I mean, and who's this other guy who decided to run? I'm running to he saw like Vivek is successful, so he's like, maybe I can do it too. Will you stop wasting my money? I got to add you now for you to get what? One response out of 2,500 people I'll interview. I got to waste time on my agents saying your name as a response choice too that nobody's going to pick. It's getting old. Really is. I'm looking for this here. I'm not seeing it. But anyway, I was trying to give you a for instance on this Ohio one. But I mean, it doesn't matter. I can give you this. I can already give this to you right now. You generally have Trump winning in the 60s, it's sometimes 70% of the non-college vote. And then what used to be maybe a 41, a 30-point lead for DeSantis with college grads, and it was never that big with us, but something in that ballpark is now, for instance, like 45 Trump, 17 DeSantis. So even the college grads have turned toward Trump now. So you can't win without winning those college grads by at least as much as like a Trump candidate or Trump himself winning those non-college. And the truth is, they're going to outvote college grads in a lot of these primary states in a Republican primary. So again, it really would need to be not just by as much as Trump, but often more. There are going to be some early states, South Carolina, there'll be quite a few college graduates. Unfortunately, for anybody not named Trump, there's going to be some college, associate degree, even vocational voters, and Trump is just killing it with them. And they're bigger chunks than people expect. And when they say, oh, it's college, okay, but a 2-year degree in that college demographic is going to do significant damage to anybody who's going up against Donald Trump, because they are Trump voters handily. These are people who were non-college 4 years ago, maybe. Now they got a 2-year degree or something like that, or a vocational training or something like that in the Trump economy. So they're very, very pro-Trump. A word on that Ohio poll, it's like R+2. I think our last poll in Ohio with J.D. Vance going against Tim Ryan was like Republican it was like an R+10 electorate. I kid you not. Ohio is very, very Republican. They use Pew Research to weight. They used what Pew thinks they found by party. And I just disagree with that. Again, you have to believe voters. What do I mean by this? I mean, it's very possible they're understating Republicans across the board, but could even be understating Trump's support. I'm sorry, my kids are like having a field day over there. All right, so has Laura thrown anything in the private chats? Because she's yelling at me to get to some questions before Will comes on. So let's do that, shall we? How do you think Newsom would do nationally? He has destroyed my state. That is a question from American Woman on Getter. American Woman. I don't know. I don't see Gavin Newsom as the profile of an American president. I think he could be painted as a West Coast liberal pretty easily. I don't think he'll have the appeal that, let's say, Joe Biden would have in Lackawanna, and we were talking about Scranton area in northeastern Pennsylvania. Whether it's true or not that it's Biden town, and it's not true, okay? Let's take a look at Biden and why he was more competitive in a state like Pennsylvania than some other Democratic candidates, all right? And why, for that matter, Barack Obama was as well, all right? I don't see Gavin Newsom doing that because I think he'll easily... We painted Gavin Newsom. We pitted Donald Trump against Gavin Newsom. And if I remember correctly, it was like Trump plus 11 or something ridiculous. Right, guys? Do you remember? I can actually go back and look, but it was so bad. It was like Trump 49, Newsom 36 or 37. It was like an 11 or 13 point lead for Donald Trump. It was significant. And part of it was, I'm sure, that not everybody was at that time familiar with Gavin Newsom, but also part of it is that he is a coastal California liberal, and that is not going to play in Wisconsin. That's not going to play in parts of Pennsylvania. Now, would he do very well in Montgomery and in Philly and Delaware? Honestly, he may not do as well in Philadelphia as you think. He may not. And by the way, look, Trump even kept Joe Biden down to 81% in Philadelphia. I would not be surprised if Gavin Newsom ended up with 78, 79% in a place like Philadelphia. That's where I'm at. I'm sorry. But really, the damage would be in areas like Monroe, where Donald Trump was able to make extreme gains from Mitt Romney, and then Joe Biden clawed back some support. Northampton, Biden should not have won that area. Most people would tell you he didn't. All right, but Lehigh, another great example. Carbon, Luzerne, Trump still held on to Luzerne, which was significant, by the way. This is an area that, hold on one second. Luzerne is an area that Barack Obama did extremely well in. All of this northeastern part. There's Lackawanna. You can see that Joe Biden did take Lackawanna back. Again, I just don't. There are some liberal areas that are going to vote for the Democrat no matter what in this. But that's not what swings northeastern Pennsylvania. What swings are some of those working people that really can go both ways. And because once upon a time, he's like Scranton Joe. Yeah, it's a load of shit. But people believed it back in 2020. Is the shine off it now? Yeah. But again, also Erie. I don't think Newsom, I think Biden does play in Erie County, which is, by the way, the location of Trump's rally this weekend, where my buddy Sean Parnell is going to be speaking with him. Perfect to bring Sean to that, by the way. That was a perfect location, but also Sean really gets it. He understands what made Western Pennsylvania Trump country and why other Republicans don't have a snowball's chance in hell of winning the state of Pennsylvania. They don't. Even with everything from 2020, this map still looks like this. If I showed you the map for Mitt Romney, you'd be blown away. Hell, if I showed you the Herbert or the W. Bush map, you'd be blown away. This used to be Gore country, folks, and Kerry. From here to here, like if you sliced off all southwestern Pennsylvania, that was Democrat country. Anyway, I just don't see it. I really don't. I know that a lot of people on the right are worried about Gavin Newsom. He would raise a lot of money. I just don't see it, American woman. Not yet. Not yet. Can my mind be changed? Sure. I'm always persuadable down the road. It's just that people who did know him in the polling we did, many who voted for Biden said they would vote for Trump over Gavin Newsom. And that is the difference between a 47 to 44 point lead over Biden and a 49 to 30 whatever point lead over Newsom. Like, you have to have Biden voters saying, yeah, I know who he is. This is the governor of California. Nah, I would vote for Trump over Gavin Newsom. That's a big deal. So I do know a lot of people are scared of him just from what we have seen in the polls right now. I'm more scared of, listen, Republicans, you should be much more afraid of Gretchen Whitmer than you should have Gavin Newsom. I'm telling you. He doesn't fit the profile of an American president in the modern era. Is this from locals? Abianco. I see both the Republican and Democratic parties splitting down the road. What are your thoughts? Well, be a Jedi, Abianco. I think Republicans are in much more risk of that happening right now than Democrats. I see all parties splitting down the road. I'm a student of history. Nothing will last forever. Nobody lasts forever. No institution lasts forever, except for the body of Christ. Amen. Anyway, I just don't see it. And that's another thing. Rich's next rant will be about fake Christians. At least I admit I'm not a very good Christian. But I'm so sick of these people harping, the Jebba the Hutts of the world. I'm such a good Christian. Now I'm going to air my divorce on Facebook and Twitter for everybody to hear about it and make lies up about my pastor and my husband. What is wrong with these people? And these fake Catholics, Joe Biden. I'm going to shower with my sexually mature daughter. I'm going to pass her around all my political friends and turn her into a nymphomaniac. I'm going to turn my other cheek while my young black sheep of the family son sleeps with my beloved dead son's wife. Who are these people? Did you hear Joe Biden's ex-husband on Newsmax yesterday? I'm sorry to get off the road. I'm getting back to you, Bianca. I am. But did you hear this guy? He's like, Joe Biden threatens him, give Jill the house or else. And he's like, or else what, Joe? Kiss it. Next, 2 months later, he's indicted. God save us all. Anyway, I see the Republican Party could fracture this year because, as you see, they're just full steam ahead coming at Trump. And I'm telling you, not just the voters that we've been isolating this episode, but even people who considered themselves Republicans for years, who have just been fed up with the party. I'm telling you, Ross Perot, you think Ross Perot was a fracture? I've said it before. I'll say it again. This could make the Ross Perot coalition look like a paper cut. Forget about a fracture. This is open fracture, all 4 limbs, vertebrae severed. But yeah, I do see it. Rich, is it possible to see if and how much of a bump Trump gets per indictment? Rumbler, there's 2 answers to that. 1, the answer is yes, and I would love to do that. But 2, the other part of that is we are way behind. It's just a matter of truth, folks. Way behind our fundraising quota. I think Laura will kill me if I spend more of our own money to do another poll. We've got to fund at least the rest of this public polling project that's up now before we do it, because I want to do Florida too, and I know I can do Florida. Nationally is a lot more expensive. But I would love to see that. We can look at other people's to do it, Rumbler. We can. Or no, I'm sorry. He's from Rumble, JP 11992288. We could look at other people's and see, like, overall, what's the consensus of the bump. I just don't trust other people as much as I trust myself. We're the ones who kept ahead of the curve. We're the ones who kept ahead of the trend. We're the ones who said when that first indictment came out, this isn't hurting him. In fact, he's headed to 60 tonight. Remember that? Do you remember the blowback months ago? And then, of course, there were several polls out there that came out and showed that that wasn't the case. How long does RFK last? I'll be honest with you, Gillian. Member of Locals, thank you for your support. Or YouTube member. I'll be honest with you, Gillian. Not long. He's raising money, but Iowa and New Hampshire have been pushed behind Biden's better states, what are expected to be his better states. South Carolina, it looks like even potentially Nevada. Did not do well in Nevada the first time. We'll see. But it is incredibly, incredibly difficult to be an incumbent president. And while he's making a go of it, I think what he's really doing is cultivating what are soon to be disenfranchised voters that could absolutely go to a Donald Trump. Because everywhere we poll, Kennedy's voters tell us in large numbers that if Kennedy doesn't get it, they will vote for Donald Trump. However, they don't say that for Ron DeSantis or Tim Scott or Nikki Haley or anybody. Synergy is with Trump and Trump alone. I don't really understand, given that Whitmer got reelected in Michigan after our lockdowns, how many GOP voters could think Michigan can be won by a DeSantis type, because they're freaking delusional. People want to believe what they want to believe. It's easy to convince somebody using stupid, again, platitudes and ephemeral arguments or ethereal arguments. What they want to believe it, so they convince themselves of it. You can throw at them what you throw at them. I mean, I did it with Kurt on Monday. What the hell are you talking about, Kurt? There is no evidence that Ron DeSantis could do what Trump does in Monroe County, Macomb County. Let's get down to brass tacks. How is he going to perform in Saginaw? All right, let me show you something. Here is Michigan. Barely lost it, okay? Genesee, which was very close. He took it back this time. Trump did carry that the first time. Saginaw, Joe Biden took back by only a few votes. With the way that we know votes have been shifted now, both of these are going back to Donald Trump. Oakland, you're going to get killed in. You're going to lose it. Trump lost it by 14. That's not that bad. I mean, you look at how bad, Dixon lost. She just got absolutely smoked. All right. But then you have Macomb over here, which Trump won with about 53.4% of the vote. That's a strong showing. You need Macomb and you need Monroe, which, by the way, look at that, 60.5%. Other Republicans, if they do win Monroe, they barely win it. They never win it by 60.5% or 61%. Never. And you need the net gains from Macomb and Monroe to overcome how bad you're going to get thumped in Oakland. Look at that. That's 110,000 in net gain for Joe Biden in Oakland alone. And then you have 330,000 roughly net gain in Wayne County. So put them together, folks. You're looking at 400,000+ just between those counties. You need these to undo it. And here's 40,000. And here is 20,000. That's 60,000, helping to overcome the deficit in Oakland. And then you need the rest of the state. The rest of the state. Nobody can do that but Donald Trump. How do I know that? He's the only one who did it. It's so counter-logical or illogical for someone to say the guy can't win an election. He already won one. And he's not only did he do it, he's the only one who won these states. It's ridiculous to say that somebody else who's untested, unproven, and mirrors every other loser that Republicans put forward is somehow going to do it. You know, it's 1:30 and our guest is here, I'm told. So I want to bring him on, but listen, we're going to have him on, Will Scharf. We're going to talk more, of course, about legal stuff because I'm a big believer in staying in your lane. All right. But I'll tell you right now, it's a perfect example. John McCain almost lost his state. He did lose the Hoosier state. Mitt Romney barely got them back. Back to planet Earth, ladies and gentlemen. Come back to planet Earth. You think everybody else is wrong? Mitchell Research has been polling Michigan for like 30 years. Do you think he's wrong when he says DeSantis is down 13, Trump is basically tied with Biden? He's not. We got Mitchell to do what we got David at Suffolk to do and what we got Beacon Research to do, which is stop pretending like everything is equal. And you put a gun to voters' heads and say, you're going to vote. And who are you going to vote for? That's not how the real world works. You want a more accurate poll? You got to find out who is and who is not going to vote based on the candidates. Iowa alone, there are 3 times more voters who say they would not vote if it was DeSantis versus Biden than there are who would say I would not vote if it's Trump versus Biden. The electorate is totally different then. Ask Mitt Willard Romney, because that's why he really lost. Not because he didn't do better with black voters, not because he didn't do better with Hispanic voters, although, of course, that could have helped. It still wouldn't have given him the election. Because there were 3 million voters missing in the states we just went over. They didn't vote. They just didn't. They stayed home. They said, sorry, Willard, we don't like you. They come out for Donald Trump. Let's bring on our guest because I'm dying to get into this stuff. There's so much to go over. He nailed it again. I read this article that he wrote, and I've been following his articles because of the one I read on the Federalist the last time we had him on, and ever since I've been reading. And he's the one first I read first who raised the flag over this plea deal and said, wait a minute, something doesn't make sense. And that is, of course, Will Scharf running for Missouri Attorney General, former federal prosecutor. Will, thank you so much for coming back on.
Really great to be on with you, Rich, as always. It's funny talking about Romney. I think my favorite poll from that 2012 cycle, it was a general electorate poll that showed that I think it was 15 or 20% of Americans thought that Romney's first name was Mittens. And it was just like the fact that like he couldn't get people to sort of understand who he was and where he came from, and just sort of the base level of kind of enthusiasm just wasn't there. It was hilarious.
Isn't he that guy who destroys businesses for a living? Didn't he take that guy's wife who was dying from cancer? Didn't he take her health insurance away? That's all we heard from people. It was like, oh God, he has.
I also heard that he was responsible, or his company was responsible, for the Domino's 555 deal, which is one of the all-time great pizza deals in history. So I guess we owe him for that. But I really wish he had done a little better in that 2012 election.
Oh man, and think about what the country has been through because he lost that election. I mean, we're talking about the weaponization of the Justice Department. I am somebody who has advocated that they have had problems for a very, very long time. And when you look at an institution like the Bureau, the FBI,
Yeah.
the truth is I never have been a fan of the FBI and never thought they were what they always portrayed themselves to be. These like above reproach, educated G-men. That's a load of crap. But it wasn't until the Obama administration that the culture of these institutions really began to spin like totally out of control, and get your political opponent, lowest learner, go to town. This one, it's just, to me, there felt like a tone from the top change. Will, like the boss is not gonna, he's not gonna tell you to do this, but wink, wink, you have the green light to abuse your authority. And it just became open season on people. And now we are where we are. And so imagine the world if Romney would have not lost.
I think that's true. With respect to the FBI, I used to prosecute bank robberies with FBI agents, and they're good guys and nothing against them. But at the roots of the agency, this was an agency that was really created and developed by J. Edgar Hoover. And he viewed a key aspect of the agency's role as domestic politics. Yeah. And he was an anti-communist, and he did some good things and some pretty bad things during his time in office. But that political root of the FBI is something that, as you said, we've just seen supercharged since the Obama years, where they're going after, whether it's parents who are involved in school boards or, just this crazy politicization of not just the FBI, but the whole Department of Justice. It's just been supercharged. And the Hunter case, I think, is a great example of that. But we need to get a Republican back in the White House. But more importantly than that, we need a Republican who's really committed to clearing house, and in particularly that agency.
Let me ask you: you are one of the first ones, if not, I think you were the first one that I read that said, and you were, that's like something's wrong with this plea deal. Something doesn't feel right here. And then when it fell apart, I remember what you had wrote, and then I'm looking at Saul. Saul had put up like a day later some of what the plea deal actually showed, and I read it, and I'm like, Will was totally right here. What do you think really happened here, Will? Like, let me just ask you general overall, your idea, your take, because I did read your Twitter thread, but just tell everybody what you think happened.
Yeah, and so like all of us were watching this thing unfold even before it blew up in court. And you knew there was something wrong. It just, for those of us who have practiced in federal court, for those of us who have been prosecutors, there was nothing about this case that seemed normal. So what happened in court, I wasn't there, but a very good friend of mine, Sam Dewey from the Oversight Project, was in court. What happened in court was there was a bait and switch where you had this plea agreement, which is a public document that's submitted to the judge. And the plea agreement was very narrow. It let Hunter Biden plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor counts of tax evasion. But the factual record included in the plea agreement extended to a ton of other stuff. Hunter's relationship with Burisma, Hunter's relationship with his Chinese private equity firm, Bohai, which has ties to CEFC, which is the Chinese Communist Party. Hunter's long record of payments from these shady foreign entities, that was all included in the factual predicate in the plea agreement, which wasn't strictly speaking necessary. So the aha moment comes when Judge Noreika then forces the government to go through this so-called pretrial diversion agreement, which had been publicly represented as, well, we're letting Hunter go into pretrial diversion on a firearms charge. But buried in that pretrial diversion agreement was a provision saying that the DOJ was agreeing not to prosecute Hunter for anything included in the factual predicate in the plea agreement. So the agreement not to prosecute him further wasn't in the plea agreement where it would normally be, where it would be subject to judicial oversight, where it would be, a normally structured plea. Instead, they buried it in this document that they thought would never see the light of day.
Yeah.
And that's why Judge Noreika blew the whole thing up. She thought it was unconstitutional and illegal. I think she was right. But more than that, the whole thing is just underhanded and another example of the politicization of the Biden Department of Justice. Their willingness to do this.
paragraph 15, folks. 15. I'm like, where is this? And I saw Saul's tweet. He's like, paragraph 15. That's right. It's there. I'm like, oh my God, buried in there. And right, they didn't expect anybody to see this. And before I get into like what this could mean with investigations, because them saying there's still an open investigation that can hinder oversight by Congress. But I want to get into the timing, because it's getting now pretty irrefutable that there's something with Biden scandals and then Trump gets indicted, or now the groundskeeper gets indicted, or his valet gets indicted. I mean, this is getting crazy. I don't know how anyone can not draw a line, because Will, just a couple of weeks ago, Jack Smith told the judge, I'm ready to move forward. I want to get this. I want to go. How could he go to a judge and for a trial date say he's ready to proceed, and he still had something like this in the works? It wasn't about January 6th. These new indictments are about the original Mar-a-Lago documents case, which you've been on to talk about before. Is this normal? Like, how could a federal prosecutor say, I'm ready to proceed, Your Honor, but then indict somebody 2 weeks later? This is crazy to me.
Yeah, Rich, I want to tease that out a little bit more. My view is that Jack Smith is gaslighting the court and gaslighting the American people. So when he first brought this indictment, he basically said, this is a simple case. This is an open and shut case. You apply the law to the facts and Trump's going to prison. Then you get into actually litigating the thing. And he says to the judge over and over again, this is a simple case. We're ready to go to trial. We're ready to go to trial any day now. Then he turns over 800,000 pages of documents, dozens of terabytes of data to the defense team, continues to insist that the case is ready to go to trial anytime, which is absurd. Then he rolls out this new indictment against the groundskeeper, adding new charge. Is the case ready to go to trial or not? Right. Both of his approaches here cannot simultaneously be true. And that's where you get into what you're talking about, which is the political timing and political nature of all of this, that you have to believe that something is going on where Jack Smith is making decisions that are not grounded in the facts of the cases that he's bringing. And that's just not the way justice is supposed to work in this country.
I'm really concerned. I mean, the Miami, that's totally different jurisdiction, with the indictment that could be coming over January 6th. I remember when they first started leveling indictments against some of these defendants, nonviolent, and we do jury research everywhere. And I decided, you know what? We're going to do a few questions that would be indicative of something we do for voir dire, just to see the difference in opinions between the nation overall and then people who are in the District of Columbia. And the difference in, was this violent? Did police die as a result of, like, the people in the District of Columbia believed every single lie. And it just was not true, Will. I mean, just factually not true. And the rest of the country thought it was being blown out of proportion, that this is politically motivated, that it was essentially a protest that got rowdy. That's what they believe, but not the District of Columbia. It was essentially an armed insurrection that police died from in an effort to repel the insurrectionists. I mean, this is the way their minds were. So I am concerned about any indictment of a former president, I don't care if they're a Democrat or a Republican, that end up in a jurisdiction like that. Why do you think we didn't see that indictment, which I'm glad we didn't, because from what the president put on Truth, his lawyers, and I always wondered this, man, his lawyers went in there and said, you're going to destroy the country. What are you doing? Like, I always wondered whether or not he would sit down with their lawyers, would sit down with the special counsel and say, aren't you at all concerned about the damage you're doing with this witch hunt? And this time they did, and it wasn't an indictment. There was just another added on charge from Mar-a-Lago. Like, what do you think about that? You think they? So
on Jan 6, well, one, it's tough to say because we haven't seen an indictment. We don't really know, what they're going to try to indict him over. But if you go by the January 6th committee's referral, it's coming really close to indicting a former president for attempting to legally challenge the results of an election and for political speech. I mean, that's at the core of everything that they're talking about. Basically, that Donald Trump shouldn't have been allowed to stand up and say that he had problems with the results of the election. Now, if that's at the core of the indictment, you're implicating obviously core constitutional principles. You're implicating the political question doctrine. You're implicating the First Amendment. It's really, really scary territory, not just for the Department of Justice, but for the country. And it could set a terrible precedent. One thing I'll note, if this thing gets brought in the D.C. district, I mean, Donald Trump doesn't have to take a jury. He could agree to a bench trial. And there are some good judges that he appointed on the D.C. district bench. Now, my guess is they'll rig the docket and make sure it ends up in front of a favorable judge. I don't know the exact procedures in the D.C. district. But to me, that's an interesting possibility, because in these Jan 6 cases, there have been some judges, Trump-appointed judges, who have been very fair and even-handed, where guys who were attacking the police got, sentences, and people who were just kind of along for the ride were let off pretty light. So that's an interesting, I'd say, side note when you talk about that venue, that there are actually some decent judges on that D.C. district who I wouldn't mind arguing a constitutional case in front of.
It's interesting. You have all of these left-wing legal minds, just skirting what you just said, which is that this really is dangerously close to speech. And then you have somebody like Roseanne Barr, who goes on Twitter and says what we all should be thinking. I mean, I have to put this up to get. She said, laundering money is not illegal when it's the Biden crime family's money. Instead, holding a protest in a country where the right to assemble and protest is literally the first rule of said country is illegal, though. So that's cool. I mean, she's being sarcastic, but every American should know this, Will. Every American should know this. This should not be. And it's really scary that you have these legal minds, claiming that that's not what's going on here. And when I did that survey, it was at the height of the media really pushing this. And yet still, half the country thought it was a little bit more than half the country thought it was a protest that went awry. 40% almost, I think it was 38 or something, thought that it was literally an armed insurrection. It was crazy. It's crazy. That's crazy in and of itself. But 90% in the District of Columbia thought that it was an armed insurrection. So the bench trial, I didn't know that was an option. Again, I'm not a lawyer, I just don't know the process. But that, in my mind, I know they might rig the docket, but my God, at least you have a chance. I mean, you just don't have a chance with a jury pool there. It's not, a bunch of Cubans who know oppression and know government overreach. It's just not. So I guess, first of all,
speaking of Cubans, by the way, the fact that immediately after being indicted, they drove Trump over to Cafe Versailles, where I believe the Bay of Pigs invasion was basically planned by Cuban exiles, was one of the greatest flexes in modern political history. And the response he got there was just amazing. Whoever planned that deserves a big gold star. I mean, it's just such a perfect move.
That was the right move because it's got over and undertones. I mean, so overtly you're making a point, and then of course you're also you're giving people who don't maybe know the history, at least they have some idea. They know where that community is. They know what they've been through. They know where they've come from. So you're definitely being a little bit underhanded to people who don't overtly know what's going on. And I just the last thing I want to ask you about is this. I guess I've heard Mike Davis and others say it, and I want your take on it as well, which is the way they pulled this off. I'm curious what your thoughts. Like the judge, do you think she really did her job here? Or some people are going obviously a little further and saying, yeah, well, I mean, she sent them back. She wasn't a potted plant, like they said on MSNBC. She said, go back to the drawing board. But if there really is this open investigation, then they're going to skirt congressional oversight. I mean, they're just going to have the DOJ constantly say, I'm sorry, Jim Jordan, that's an open investigation. We can't respond to that. Or whomever, is the one, that's trying to get some information. What do you think? I mean, was she just in a rock and a hard place here? You think she was really doing her job? Or do you think there's some grand thing? And I mean, don't put anything past anybody anymore, Will. I'm just curious. What do you think?
So I think she did well. I think we have to think about what the role of a judge is here.
Yeah.
So when you have a plea agreement, typically that involves the dismissal of charges or involves an agreement not to pursue further charges, that's subject to judicial approval. And the judge's responsibility is ensuring that the trade that DOJ is making upholds the ends of justice. That's what judges are supposed to do. What Judge Noreika, and that's the role that judges typically have in plea deals. What Judge Noreika was particularly concerned about here, and I think this was very wise of her, was that DOJ was effectively asking her to sign off on a deal, to approve a deal, to allow a deal to go forward, but they weren't giving her any opportunity to do her job, to assess whether the ends of justice were actually advanced by this plea deal. And as a result, she viewed the whole thing as unlawful, as potentially unconstitutional, raises core separation of powers issues. So I take my hat off to her.
Yeah,
She did exactly what a judge is supposed to do, which is her job. And she wasn't going to allow herself to be turned into a rubber stamp for this crazy bargain that DOJ struck with Hunter's lawyers. So far, she's doing great. Now, what interests me is they're going to come back in September with a new deal. And my guess is that new deal is going to look a lot like the old deal. And my guess is they're going to use every trick in the book to try to push that past her again. And what she does at that point, I think, will really determine what her legacy on this case is. But that's what we have to look for now.
I guess what's your take? And I guess I said it was the last one before, but you got me curious. I feel like a lot of this lawfare that we're seeing going on, I really do feel like Republicans could be more aggressive and that this would come to an end. But there's just tiptoeing to, do we start impeachment proceedings or an inquiry against Joe Biden or Merrick Garland? And you have Republicans fighting over whether or not, like I heard Tom Tiffany the other day say, Americans don't have the appetite to impeach every single person in the Biden administration. You have to make the case. He said, instead of doing what Democrats do, which is essentially point the gun and fire before you aim, he said, we need to take aim first. We need to make our case. And if we're going to do it, it has to be against the big guy himself, because Americans are not going to tolerate this constant impeaching of different cabinet officials, different directors of different agencies. It's not going to work that way. I have to say, I believe that. I agree with them. I don't think Americans, they don't want to see that. Republicans, the base, I'm sure they do. Mayorkas, Ray, the rest of them, Garland, they want them all impeached. That's not how Americans work. The electorate is not going to tolerate that. But what do you think they should be more aggressive here with impeachment? Or do you think, we're there yet? I understand Rand Paul's concern. I guess it's something I should qualify this with. I had been saying throughout the Trump administration that we cannot politicize the process of impeachment. However, now we're getting to the point, Will, where it's like, it's so clear that they're indicting their political opposition every time they're in political trouble. It's just so clear to me they're doing that. And then also what Shapley and other whistleblowers have said really is bad. This isn't a phone call with Zelensky. This isn't even Watergate. They are alleging that these people took bribes from horrible foreign countries, the Chinese, Romania. Rudy Giuliani turns out to have been vindicated. What's your thought on the whole thing? And of course you are running for the Attorney General of Missouri. There are people who want Republican attorney generals to get more aggressive. What's your take on where we are? Because I do still believe it's got to be right, but what's your thoughts?
So if everything the whistleblowers have said about Hunter and Joe Biden and this international influence peddling operation that they were running, if everything's true, it's the greatest scandal in American political history
ever.
A sitting vice president, a current president, is on the take for potentially tens of millions of dollars to foreign countries, including foreign adversaries like China. If that's all true, it's the greatest political scandal in American history, far exceeding anything we've seen before, and heads need to roll for that. Now, you're making a broader point, though. We need to reestablish deterrence. The American system of government, the American system of checks and balances, the constitutional order, structured federalism, all of that only works if both parties play ball. If one party's not playing by the rules and the other party is, then the system is just going to get increasingly and further out of whack. And that's what we need to be worried about. I don't think we need to go about impeaching and indicting people all willy-nilly. But when Democrats have violated the law, they need to be held accountable for that. When Democrat office holders are violating their oaths of office, I think there are grounds for impeachment. So I think there's some balance needed, but most of all, this system's not going to work if our people are getting sent to prison and the Democrats are just doing whatever the heck they want. That's not. It's like late Republican Rome, where you get this upward ratchet until you have gangs of gladiators fighting in the streets. Like we can't end up there, and the only way to avoid ending up there, in my view, is to reestablish deterrence, reestablish this broad understanding that the constitutional order and the separation of powers, aren't going to be violated. And we just need to stop all the craziness in DC. I think the next Republican administration can achieve a lot of that by depoliticizing, the federal law enforcement, federal intelligence agencies. But we just need to be thinking about the end game here. And I don't think the way to get to the desired end game is ready, fire, aim. But I think we do need to start punching back.
What did it for me? You said what the whistleblower said is true. What did it for me is I'm listening to the testimony and I'm also thinking about documents Grassley had released. And I don't know that much about what happened in Romania, but Ukraine, that's one thing. Chinese stuff, obviously very concerning. But I remembered a speech that Biden had given. And I remember the embassy in Kiev kind of pushed back. They didn't like it because they don't like people meddling, or at least, again, there's that word overtly, but overtly meddling in their own domestic affairs. And he went as vice president to Ukraine and basically said, we're going to give you this money, but you have to do this with it. And it was, of course, in the energy sector. And of course, now that looking back, hindsight's always 2020. It's like he was using taxpayer funds to direct that money to a certain industry, the energy industry, to build it up. And those people were giving him, and the people in that industry were giving him money. I mean, bribes to direct this money to them. And I don't know why that speech stuck in my head, but I went back and I looked, and the dates, it's like a month and a half before the payment, before this alleged payment. And it's just not, there's no way that's that coincidental. And to me, that's what did it for me. Like, this really happened. They did this because the timeline is just so convincing. It's a fact pattern. It's like, you have Grassley and others saying this is what happened and when, and then you go back and you look at their actions. And then with China, there's an article from the Washington Post. Obama had sent him there to quarterback those negotiations. And even the Washington Post wrote an op-ed the week he came back and said, this is not what Obama sent him to do. Why was he so light on? You remember that? And now here we go, right?
Hunter was on the plane with him, right?
Yeah, exactly. And now here we go, right? So now we have some answers as to why this inexplicable behavior happened. It's money. That's because he was paid, to do. I mean, this is way worse than anything. Like you said, it is the greatest scandal ever if all of this is, which I do believe it is true at this point. I think there's at least enough for me. And I think it'll only get worse. I don't know what else could explain it,
let's if we have a minute, let's run through the time. Let's run through the timeline on Ukraine, because I think it's really revealing. As a former prosecutor, I think I could take facts in the public record on the Ukraine issue today and get an indictment for federal bribery against Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So Hunter Biden is hired by Burisma. He's on their board despite no prior experience in the gas and energy sector. He's hired. Now, according to the 1023, the whistleblower, this foreign whistleblower, according to the 1023, the chairman of Burisma says openly that they hired Hunter Biden in part because Burisma is under investigation and they need political cover both in America and Ukraine from the Biden family, and Hunter is the key to that. He says that they then pay either $5 or $10 million to Hunter and Joe Biden through a network of foreign accounts in order to achieve a particular end, which is the end of this Ukrainian investigation into Burisma, which is making it impossible for Burisma to raise capital in the United States of America and execute deals in the United States of America. Now, shortly after this payment is when Joe Biden goes over there and holds up $1 billion of promised American loan guarantees to the Poroshenko administration until they agree to fire Shokin, who is the prosecutor who's investigating Burisma. So you have a record showing that Hunter is brought on board to end this investigation. Burisma then makes these massive secret payments to Hunter and Joe, and then Joe executes on exactly what they said they hired Hunter to do, namely ending this investigation. Now, like I said, if it's all true, it is the craziest, most terrible political scandal in American history. Millions of dollars changing hands to change American foreign policy. That's exactly what the founders were worried about in terms of foreign influence on American politics. We need to get to the bottom of it. I think heads need to roll. But it's just that basic timeline is just so damning. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that alone, what you just laid out, is incredibly damning. And you didn't even need the audio, which struck me a couple of weeks ago when the Daily Mail released the audio of Biden talking with Poroshenko. Todd Wood and I know they're not huge, but Creative Destruction Media, who has sponsored polling we've done, I remember during the impeachment hearings, they got their hands on that audio years ago during the impeachment of Trump over the phone call. They had published those audio. There were several tapes, but he got them from a member of parliament, the Ukrainian parliament, because they were investigating potential corruption with the U.S. administration, and they had those tapes, Will. And that alone is just him talking about, not Shokin, Poroshenko blatantly saying, that I talked to Shokin for you like you asked me to, and I told him he needs to go. He needs to resign. I mean, that alone, that seems to me the smoking gun. But the timeline of what you just laid out, you really would have to be an imbecile to think there's anything, there's an alternate explanation. I just don't buy it. But this is why we need good, in order to reform this area of the government, we need good people who understand it, Will. So I'm glad you're running for the office you're running for. Every state should have a solid attorney general who gets what's going on. It knows what time it is in this country and knows how to fairly apply the law. So tell people, where they can go to follow you, where they can go to check you out, support you, and the likes of it.
Sure. Our website is votescharf.com, VOTESCHARF. You sign up for our updates. You'll get all the stuff I write, both about our campaign, but also about the Bidens and Trump indictment, all that. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Truth Social at Will Scharf, Instagram as well. But really appreciate you having me on, Rich. Always good talking to you and always a lot of fun. So thank you.
Yeah, I can't wait till you come back. You're killing it with the articles and the Federalist. I love them. Keep them coming. I really am enjoying them. And you've been ahead of the game here. So thanks for coming on, Will. Looking forward to having you back. Best of luck out there.
Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
You too. All the best. Follow him on Twitter. Sign up on his website, folks, and support him if you like what he has to say. I got to tell you, every single state should have a Will Scharf as an attorney general. Every single state. This is, we're at a point now where that is an office that has been, I don't want to say neglected. Like, people haven't been paying attention. We always care about governors. We even care about Secretary of States. The attorney general of a state is a big deal. Ken Paxton's obviously a very high profile one. When you make a splash the way he does, you get what he's got, which is obviously people coming at him with lawfare. There needs to be people who, again, I am concerned. And I saw a lot of your comments. Rich, what are you talking about? They crossed the Rubicon. I get that. But still, I'm not saying there aren't things that you can't go after them for. I think it's out in the open. Will just laid out in great detail how you could get an indictment against Joe Biden today over Ukraine and Victor Shokin without the tape that Todd Wood published years ago that Daily Mail is pretending they broke a couple weeks ago. It's crazy. Daily Mail, you're 2 years too late, 3 years too late. That tape's been out there. Even without that audio, you can get it. And I think you need people like Will who understand this is a deterrent and this is just to go after somebody on. Otherwise, you're going to turn into them quickly, really quickly. But they are doing things that there's so much wrongdoing going on. Believe me, there is no lack of just prosecutions to go after. Republicans could shut this down. They could, folks. They could shut this down today. I remember having Daniel Street on. I remember having Mike Davis on immediately after the first Alvin Bragg indictment. None of this should be going on. And if they would have moved and acted on it, it'd be done. You know, they're just sitting back and tiptoeing. You know, I mean, Jim Jordan, Chuck Grassley, they've done a lot of good stuff to uncover new information that we didn't know. I do think the whistleblowers can be proud of themselves now. I believe, you know, the judge is in a bad position. It's a very dirty and crooked system. So it's very hard for even a judge like her. But they're making it out like she's some Trump appointee. It's just nuts. That's not how it goes. Mike Davis was there. He laid it out the other day on War Room. This is not a Trump-friendly person. The bottom line is the whistleblowers ruined their lives and careers, but they didn't do it for nothing. And they gave that judge cover. I'm telling you, whether she wanted to do the right thing or not, without the whistleblowers, it would have been much harder for her to do the right thing. And I think, frankly, in this day and age, it's easy to do the wrong thing. And I think you're often rewarded by doing the wrong thing. Even judges who want to do what's right have obstacles, have considerations. It's not in their best interest. That's tragic. So God bless those whistleblowers. Really, God bless them, because it's not even safe, let alone smart for your professional career to do that. I do think, and Cosmic Messenger said, you agree with Will. I think they are going to try to sneak something by the judge again. Me too. Obviously, Will thinks that too. He knows better than I do. It's what, and he made a good point, it's what she does, this judge does, when they try to do that. That is going to say a lot. Yeah, so that's something else. Let's see. Yeah, since Reagan left office, this is New York City Guns on Rumble. Glenn, since Reagan left office, the Republican Party has been garbage. They're weak and fearful. I couldn't agree with you more. And that's one thing you would have thought, Glenn, they learned under Trump. Take nothing else away except but how to fight, right? And they couldn't even take that. They're just cowards. They're disgusting. And then they wonder, Glenn, why so many of these voters in Iowa, in Ohio, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, oh, Trump did it. We can do it too. No, you can't. This is why people don't view you equally with him. Because you're not. You've not proven that. Actually, you've given them all of the reason to think otherwise, to think that you're not trustworthy. Do you think Democrats would just sit back, lay back, while Republicans tear at their beloved president, Barack Obama? They would move hell and earth to protect and defend him from lawfare. Not Republicans. So these people don't believe them. They just don't believe them. Dale from Locals. I keep getting texts to take polls and will likely continue to get them as I live in Iowa. Absolutely. I'm my texter myself. I have not responded to any since I'm concerned about phishing. Can you or anyone in the community let me know which ones are okay to respond to and which are likely bogus? I've gotten texts from Political Research 2023 and Research Polls, to name two. You're from Locals, Dale. If you put them up, and frankly, all of you, anyone who's on Locals, if you put them up on the Locals community, take a screenshot of your text invite and send it to me, and I will be happy to check and see whether it is a legitimate poll to the best of my ability. Some of them I know and I can recognize. Every single text. Okay, let me say this. There are standards and guidelines. I know I'm over time, but bear with me. I want to tell you all this because I think I can help you avoid some of this crap. There's a lot of phishing. In response to phishing, spam, the industry has adopted what are these guidelines and these regulations, and it's called 10DLC. All right. If you're a pollster, if you are a political candidate, committee, some kind of pack, right? Or if you're even doing marketing, anything like that, you must go through a brand verification process. Very easy to do it with political entities, especially if it's a national, because you have an FEC number, a filing number, and they can check you through Campaign Verify very easily. But pollsters and others were businesses, and we have to go through our own verification process. Then you have to follow the guidelines, because if you do not, your stuff likely won't go through, and it will until they catch you, and they'll catch you kind of quick. Normally they do. And then you can be banned or unverified, and they can remove you. Anyone who is being 10DLC compliant, you should be able to spot right away. And that, of course, increases the likelihood that they're legitimate. A pollster should tell you the agent's first name. So, hi, Dale. It's Rich with the organization from Big Data Poll. Now, what the hell are you doing? We are conducting a survey on the 2024 Iowa caucuses in your state, whatever, however you say it. Link below if you want to take the interview online, you can click the link below, or you can respond here. This is a live agent interview. Either way, it'll only take a few short minutes to complete. Let your voice be heard or something like that. Then there's opt-out language that is mandatory. Press 2 to opt out, or reply stop to opt out in future messages or whatever. So there has to be the agent's name. Typically, we are required to give the first name of who we're trying to reach. That's what we just like to say, usually the first name. What the agent's name is. So if it's one of our employees, it'd be like, hey, Dale, it's Mitch. Hey, Dale, it's Matt. Or hey, Dale, it's Laura. Or sometimes you'll get them from me, right? But it's always the agent's name with your name saying hello, the organization that you're from. So it's Big Data Poll, it's the Trafalgar Group, it's SurveyMonkey, it's whomever. Research polls I've never heard of. Political Research 2023, never heard of. If they're saying that's their organization, Google the organization and make sure it's legitimate. Then look at the survey link. Sometimes they can be a little bit funny. If they say anything like Alchemer or monkey or polefish or something, you can be pretty sure that that's legitimate. We do two things. One, we'll either say Alchemer or it'll actually say Big Data Poll, because sometimes we use our own domain. So that's a good way. But if they're not leaving first name for them, first name for you, organization's name, and opt-out language, don't touch it at all. Delete it, get rid of it. You can also reply, because they're not allowed to text you unless it's called peer-to-peer. So if you get one from me and you say, is this really Rich? I'm going to text back almost all the time. Yeah, it's me. Go ahead, Dale. And a lot of times I'll say, you can check out our website. It's www. I'll put the website in there, bigdatapoll.com. They'll research it. They'll see that it's us, and they'll take it. But you have to be 10DLC compliant. And if it's not giving you all that stuff, it's phishing. Don't touch it. And your communication direct, you can either report them. Just make sure before you report someone that you really do know it's phishing. Because if you report a pollster, then they have to go through this big process. It's a pain in the ass. We had somebody, it was political. They wanted to report us because they did not like the research we were doing. So political opposition reported us, and we actually had an issue. It was ridiculous. The communication companies were pissed once they found out that that's what happened to us, but they did have to go through this whole verification thing again. It can be very difficult for a pollster. So make sure, unless you know better, don't report them. You could just delete them or hit opt out. If you don't want to do them and you don't want text to be sent to you, when you hit opt out, every time he uploads that same list, or that firm uploads another list that's randomly generated and your number is on it, you will be excluded through their software. At least good software should do that. Ours does. So that's a couple of pointers. But if you guys aren't unsure, you take a screenshot of it, throw it up on Locals if you're a member of Locals, and I'll do my best to tell you what I think. All right. With that in mind, wow, it is July 28th, so I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but this is, again, we're days away from the price change here. Now is the time to join the People's Pundit community on Locals. All right, so if I give you guys, bear with me 1 second while we have this thing flashing back and forth. Let me give you what's going to happen, a little bit of a rundown. Okay. Starting August 1st, there will be an increase from $5 to $7 a month or $70 a year. If you already have a monthly or yearly subscription, you can keep your current rate. If you are on monthly, now is the time. It's a good deal to switch over and get it grandfathered in at $50 a year. And you can do that by clicking on the update link that I put in the locals post. You just do peoplespundit.locals.com/subscription. And if you're already a supporter, it's going to give you a chance to update it. If you're a member and you have thought about becoming a supporter, lock in the $50 now before August 1st. Again, we have a lot of big things that are coming this year. Live results and coverage of off-cycle gubernatorial elections in Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi. And we are very excited for 2024, which will be our biggest year ever. So go ahead and join now. YouTube, you have it in the community section. If you want to unsubscribe from YouTube, come on to Locals. Use the code that I put in the Locals, the YouTube community notes, and that'll take a month off. So basically, it's like you're not paying double for the same month for YouTube and Locals. All right. What else? About polling, a little word about polling. You might have noticed we're starting to change stuff at the Public Polling Project. What do you think of our little new graphic? Simple, but easy, right? I think it's much better than the bubble thing, right? Anyway. Publicly funded public opinion. The link is in the description of every version of this right now, whether it's on Rumble, Locals, YouTube, Getter. It is in the description, bigdatapoll.com. You could scroll down, or you could just check the link in the description, which will take you right to the Public Polling Project. I did see that there were some contributions as we were talking today. That's great. I very much would love to get another national poll. So we've done quite a few, and you might notice the title of that crowdfunder. That one is post-midterm. That is the very same form that we put up after the midterms. So all that we've done since then has been just on the back of that one. And let's get this one done, and so we can move on to another one. But in the meantime, if we hit the target on this one, I'll do another national. I'd really like to get another take of especially on the Republican side. I would expect Trump backed off a little bit, but it's still incredibly dominant. And I think everybody else probably have fallen just based on the state numbers that we got. But it's in the description in every single video right now. So go down to your description, find a link, contribute if you can. If everyone just gave $1, we could poll every month. All right. Well, everyone gave $1 every month. But of course, share it far and wide, because the bigger the contributor base we have, the less of a burden it is on people who give time and time again. All right. So share it far and wide with people, like-minded people. Let's get a bigger contributor base. Again, one more time. If there is another nominee other than Donald Trump, who also will have a difficult time winning, everyone will. But if it's not Donald Trump, it goes back to being the Mitt Romney map or worse. Iowa and Ohio go back to being battleground states. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan go back to not being competitive. Florida goes back to being a fight, although I do think DeSantis could easily win Florida. That would be one state you'd be able to take off with him, but North Carolina would be tough. I think he could do it, but it still would be tough, but it wouldn't matter. The Sun Belt, the Rust Belt, if you don't win something in the Rust Belt, it doesn't matter if you do better in Georgia. It doesn't. And by the way, there's no evidence that would be the case anyway. So the bottom line is you've got to make sure that you're competitive in the Rust Belt. You cannot lose Iowa or Ohio. And all indications right now suggest that could happen. And Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin are just not even in play. So I just went over an hour and a half worth of why. Stupid little arguments like, oh, he won by his governor election, and Tim Scott has got such a great story. That's unserious. Anyway, special thanks to Will Scharf, ladies and gentlemen, for coming on again, running for the Missouri Attorney General's office. Fantastic commentary, way ahead of the curve again. We're way ahead of the curve in the trend on the polls. He's way ahead of the curve in the trend on legal analysis. He called that before anybody else. And the article is on the Federalist for posterity, boy. Believe me. And his Twitter account, if you're not following him, check him out now, because he also puts up pretty detailed tweets that really insightful. So special thanks again for Will for coming on. We'll have him back again soon. In the meantime, everybody have a great weekend. Don't forget on Sunday, it's right here, the ideological origins of the American Revolution. We will wrap up this Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern time for book club. All right, Locals Book Club. So don't forget it. Next, maybe we'll go to the Federalist Papers or something. I'm not sure yet. We'll talk about that on the book club. It is a good tee up to the Federalist Papers, or at least some of them that deal with some of the concerns that anti-federalists had that we're talking about now. We're kind of teeing up. Henry, Mercy, they were all right. I hate to say it, but now here we are. So it's not like we'd go over all the Federalist Papers. There are even more extensive writings about the questions involved really a contradiction of the American Revolution. The building of the federal government was a contradiction, because it's like they just went through all of this not to have a centralized government that could potentially impede on, obviously, liberties, different liberties. But how do you build a central government now after you just fought a revolution to cast one off, especially in the mold of the old English Constitution? And it's interesting how they arose at those solutions. But the bottom line is, none of them ever believed, whether they were Federalists or anti-Federalists, it was never going to work with a morally bankrupt population, with an ignorant population, and a population that didn't understand the fundamental inverse relationship between liberty and tyranny. And that it is your job to be a stewardship of it. All right, so I'm out. And I will see you guys book club on Sunday. Everyone else, see you soon. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers. As always, nothing but love for you. Laura says deuces. Talk to you soon, guys. Stay safe.